no one has officially accused Mercedes of cheating. But no one looked relaxed either when the first images of the W17 were released. In Formula One, silence often says more than any press release. Mercedes head into 2026 carrying two advantages that are making the paddock deeply uncomfortable. The first is the power unit. The compression ratio controversy is not just technical noise, it is a signal that some manufacturers already feel they are behind before the season has even begun. History shows that when an engine advantage is locked in at the start of a new regulatory cycle, it rarely disappears quickly. The second factor is aerodynamics. The W17 launch renders reveal a sidepod concept that clearly diverges from the prevailing trend. It is not extreme, but it is deliberate. Under the 2026 regulations, with active aerodynamics and far greater sensitivity to airflow management, these kinds of deviations usually point to a different philosophy rather than a cosmetic experiment. The concern for Mercedes' rivals is that these two strengths reinforce each other. A highly efficient power unit offers greater aerodynamic freedom. A stable aero platform creates more opportunities to exploit energy deployment. And with cost caps, power unit homologation, and long development lead times, any team that misjudges the direction early risks losing half a season simply trying to understand what it got wrong. That is why the word 2014 is quietly resurfacing in the paddock. Not as nostalgia, but as a warning. So before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed, because this is not about speculation or hype, but about why so many people inside Formula One are genuinely uneasy about what Mercedes might already have in its hands. Back in 2014, Mercedes did not dominate because it broke the rules. It dominated because it understood them sooner, interpreted them more decisively, and committed fully while others hesitated. The advantage was not just performance, but structure. Rivals could see what Mercedes was doing, yet still found themselves unable to replicate it quickly enough. That memory matters now, because the early signs of 2026 are triggering the same instincts across the grid. The power unit is where most of that anxiety begins. The 2026 regulations fundamentally reshape how performance is generated. The removal of the MGU-H, the increase in MGU-K output from 120 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts, and the near-even split between electrical and combustion power place enormous emphasis on efficiency, integration, and deployment strategy. While many engineers expect convergence on the electrical side, the internal combustion engine remains an area where meaningful gaps can exist. That is why the compression ratio dispute became such a flashpoint. Ferrari, Audi, and Honda have all raised concerns that Mercedes and Red Bull may be exploiting an interpretation of the regulations that allows them to run effectively higher compression ratios than rivals, even while remaining nominally within the rules. The key issue is not the stated 16-to-1 limit itself, but how and when that limit is measured. The FIA has so far appeared sympathetic to the interpretation used by Mercedes and Red Bull, noting that compliance is based on measurements taken at ambient temperatures. FIA single-seater director Nicolas Tombazis acknowledged that discussion was inevitable under new regulations, saying, "When we have new regulations, I think it is normal that there will be some discussion points, some areas which need a bit of clarification or adjustment." He added that the FIA was confident the rules could be clarified and that the issue would not remain a talking point for long. But from a rival perspective, that reassurance cuts both ways. If Mercedes is already comfortable with the current interpretation, any later clarification risks coming too late to prevent an early season advantage. Audi's F1 project leader, Mattia Binotto, was explicit about his expectations, saying his hope was not for immediate clarity, but for defining a methodology for the future. That alone hints at a belief that whatever edge exists now may be impossible to neutralize quickly. The deeper problem is time. Red Bull Powertrain's technical director Ben Hodgkinson laid out the reality in blunt terms. He explained that the gestation time for power unit ideas is far longer than for chassis development, pointing out that producing new internal components can take up to 12 weeks, followed by durability testing and then another lengthy process to introduce updates into the engine pool. In his words, if a manufacturer has an advantage in race 1, it's going to take some time before anyone else can catch up. That context matters because the 2026 rules do not simply reset the field, they constrain recovery. Homologation, limited engine allocations, and the inclusion of power unit spending under financial regulations all discourage radical mid-season changes. Even if a rival understands exactly what Mercedes is doing, the ability to respond is heavily restricted. This is where the W17's aerodynamic concept enters the picture. On the surface, the sidepod design shown in the launch renders might seem like a minor detail, but in modern Formula One, especially under rules built around active aerodynamics and airflow sensitivity, such details often reveal underlying priorities. Most teams appear to be converging around downwashing sidepod concepts that aggressively manage airflow towards the rear. Mercedes' approach looks different. After a narrow inlet, the sidepod rises again towards the back. It is a subtle deviation, but one that suggests Mercedes may be prioritizing stability, flow consistency, or interaction with active aero elements in a way others are not. Importantly, Mercedes has not claimed this is a radical innovation. Toto Wolff has repeatedly framed the W17 as part of a long, methodical process. Formula One will undergo significant change in 2026, and we are prepared for that transition, Wolff said. The new regulations demand innovation and absolute focus across every area of performance. He described the release of the first images as simply the next step, and emphasised the collective effort between Brackley and Brixworth. That language is familiar. It mirrors the calm, process-driven tone Mercedes adopted in previous regulation changes, including the hybrid era. What unsettles rivals is not what Mercedes is saying, but what it is not saying. There is no defensive posture, no attempt to downplay expectations, and no visible concern about regulatory scrutiny. The suspicion is not that Mercedes has stumbled upon a single trick, but that its entire package has been optimized around the new rules from an early stage. A power unit that delivers efficiency and flexibility allows more freedom in aerodynamic packaging. A stable aero platform, in turn, enables more consistent energy deployment. Each element amplifies the other. This interconnected advantage is precisely what teams fear most, because it cannot be addressed in isolation. Fixing an aerodynamic weakness does nothing if the power unit cannot support the necessary operating window. Improving the engine is of limited value if the car lacks aerodynamic stability to exploit it. The grid's nervousness is also shaped by recent history. Mercedes has spent the ground effect era struggling to understand aerodynamic behaviours that others mastered more quickly. Yet, despite those struggles, the team still finished second in the Constructors' Championship in 2025. Now, with a clean sheet set of regulations that play directly to its traditional strengths in systems integration and power unit development, the balance of expectation has shifted sharply. Even the commercial side reinforces the impression of preparedness. Mercedes' new partnership with Microsoft places cloud computing and enterprise AI at the heart of its operations, from simulation workloads to real-time decision-making. With each car generating more than 1 million data points per second, the ability to process and act on that information efficiently is no longer a marginal gain, but a competitive necessity. Again, none of this is illegal. None of it even proves that Mercedes will dominate. But Formula One is not driven by proof alone. It is driven by signals, patterns, and experience. And for many in the paddock, the signals are uncomfortably familiar. The idea that Mercedes might arrive in 2026 with an advantage that is both legitimate and deeply entrenched is what keeps rival engineers awake at night. Not because they believe Mercedes is cheating, but because they fear Mercedes has once again played the game better than everyone else. So the real question is not whether Mercedes has broken the rules. It is whether the rules, as written and interpreted, have once again allowed one team to build a head start that others simply cannot erase under the modern constraints of Formula One. Does the W17 represent Mercedes quietly locking in a decisive advantage before a single race has been run? And if so, Is there anyone on the grid truly equipped to stop a repeat of 2014? Let me know what you think and write your view in the comments below.